Alright, welcome to the Facebook login tutorial. This is going to show you how to set up Facebook login in your own application. Now, this is really important because a lot of people use Facebook, so we want to make sure we know how to integrate with it. Go ahead and go to developer.facebook.com, you see in the bar up there. And when you go there, you're going to see this website here. Almost every popular platform has one of these. Go to like developer.twitter.com, .instagram.com, whatever you want. You can check it out. It's all pretty similar process. So we're going to stay here. We're going to look at Facebook. And you can see that they have quite a bit. You can usually tell the quality of a platform like this by the amount of API documentation they have. But we're going to be focused on just a little piece. So go to the Apps drop-down menu here and click on it. And we're going to create a new app. You can see that mine for our planner is there. There's other ones too, but we're just going to click here and we're going to create a new app. So when you're ready, go ahead and click that button. And you'll see a pretty simple modal pop up here. So you're going to put in the display name that's going to show up in the Facebook app for your program. So I'm just going to name this GHS Graph API test. Doesn't matter what you name it. This is a little bit more important. We'll get to more of it later though. You might want to just put GHS Graph API test in here so we can keep consistency, but that's fine. And the rest of it you can ignore. And then you have to do the robot check, which I always fail. Let's see how I do. These things are always a nightmare. Oh, look at that. And if it's not going to take forever, then we'll be okay. Oh, good, I'm human. Okay. So there you go. Your app is created, and you can check it out on Facebook. Now you need two pieces of information here, your app ID and your app secret. And you'll have to type in your password to get that, so you can't see mine. Okay. And you'll need both of these for the next part of the tutorial. Right, here's part 2 of the Facebook login tutorial. The first part we covered setting up your app on the Facebook platform, and this part will cover how to use the code to get login rolling. So we're actually just going to copy this straight from another website. This is perfectly okay. Everybody uses the same login code for Facebook because it's generic. So, don't ever feel bad about searching the internet for stuff like this and straight up copying it as you see what I'm about to do. I put the URL where I found all this in the more information section for this video. So you can go ahead and pull that from there and go to the website now. And we're just going to copy and paste all of the code into our text editor. And here it is. So we're going to walk through this code kind of step by step. And I'm going to tell you what it does. So here's this first piece. It says load the SDK asynchronously. This basically just loads all the functions for Facebook in a way that's not going to stop the browser from doing what it needs to do. So don't change that. Don't worry about it. Every Facebook login will have that. So we're going to leave that alone. Next, this says initialize the SDK upon load. This means after it's done loading the SDK asynchronously, it's going to call this function, which you should know the syntax for. It says window.fb async init, don't worry about that, equals function, and here's what the function does. Any function that starts with fb dot something is a Facebook API function, and the initialize function has a few parameters. This one, the app ID, that should look familiar. That's from when you set up your application in Facebook, you have an app ID that you need to copy and paste right into there. Okay, the rest of that is pretty standard channel URL, status, cookie, XFBML, all that stuff you can kind of just leave the way it is. So, alright, next piece, listen for and handle the status change events. When Facebook is done authenticating, it sends a message, a status change message. So what you're doing here is you're subscribing to that message, and when that message comes in, you're going to run a function that takes the argument of the response. And here's what that function does. And you should recognize a lot of this notation here. So function, response, is the argument of that function. It says if the response.auth response, basically if it's the user has authorized your app and they're logged into Facebook, we're going to do something. And Facebook.api is another Facebook function call, and this is where you're calling the API. So you're calling it with a node of me. Nodes are something that Graph API gets into a lot more detail with. You're going to learn a lot more about it if you delve into Facebook a little bit deeper. But for now, we're going to leave this saying /me because we want to learn about ourselves. We want to learn about what we do on Facebook. You can change this to say all sorts of other things like another user, or you could change it to say your friends, /me/friends. You really can go all out with this thing. And to learn more about it, you can just do a quick search for the Graph API Explorer. And you can check this out because Facebook has this great tool that lets you explore their API. And here's what you're looking at. You know, you're looking at the node of me and the fields of ID and name in here. But you could change that to be anything. So I suggest that you play around with that for a little bit before you do any coding with it, just so you can kind of get used to how this works. Alright, once you're done, you're going to come back in here and we have function that takes the argument of me. So the API call returns me. And me has a bunch of different properties. Okay, it's got a name, me.name. That's the name property of you. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to just filter the name into a pretty simple div here. So we're going to do document.getElementID.auth display name, and we're going to change the inner HTML to your name. Now this is where you could do anything you want. You know, again, we've just put it right into a span, excuse me, not a div. But you can again put this into an A tag, a P tag, whatever you want to do. This is where you can get creative. All right, and we'll also take your ID. So we're going to do me.id. Okay, and the ID property of Facebook is a picture. So me.id, that's actually an image. So we want to change the Facebook ID to me.id. We're going to change its source to where your picture comes from. Now your picture comes from this URL. Notice what I've done is we have graph.facebook.com/ we're adding on your ID tag /picture. That gets your picture from Facebook. And you can actually type that URL into your browser and you'll come up with your profile picture. Alright, I bet you could probably figure out what the rest of this does. Me.email, me.gender, me.birthday. Assuming you filled all those things in and they're set to public on your Facebook profile, you'll be able to see all of it. Okay, these last pieces are, you know, just pretty standard. I wouldn't worry too much about them. It's just some display things. So you get the idea. All right, this last piece here, this is another jQuery function. It's the logout function. So it's basically saying we're going to give the user the ability to log out. When they click the logout button, they're going to run facebook.logout. Okay, so that's the end of our JavaScript for now. You'll add more to it later. And here's our HTML for this little tutorial. Again, we haven't done much more here than just added a header, a login button. Okay, so we have this div, and the div inside is the Facebook-login.button, or dash button. Now that ID, what that does is it corresponds to the Facebook SDK, so it provides you a login button with the SDK, so you don't actually have to make it, which is nice. Most SDKs do that. That's something that you want to see in frameworks that you use. So that's what this class does. That's why it's important to have. And we're going to keep all these things as they are. This scope is really important for getting deeper and more complex into Graph API. For now, we'll just leave it as email and user check-ins. But you can learn a lot more about what you need for this if you kind of do a little searching. And once you start looking for, like, what do I want to get out of Graph API, you'll see all the additional information that you need to include here to allow the user to permit your app to access it. Popular ones are friends, timeline, post. There are all sorts of permissions, so you'll see. Okay, finally, here's where we'll display our information. We've seen this div and its ID before. Here's another span and its ID. We saw that. That's your name. That corresponds to this piece of JavaScript that we talked about before. Then there's this span with your Facebook ID, your display email, your gender, and your date of birth, and of course your picture. Alright, so that sums up the code that we need to do pretty nicely. This is a very basic layout of the code that you need to include to make Facebook, work. And then the rest of it is testing it out to see what it looks like. So that's what we'll do in part 3. Alright, so here's part 3 of the Facebook tutorial. Now we have to get it ready to test. So we're back on the developers.facebook.com part. And what we need to do is we're going to test this on JS Fiddle for a reason I'll tell you later. So we want to type in app domains, fiddle.jshell.net, and the same URLs for site URL and mobile URL. Now the reason we need to do this is because you need to be online on the internet to test Facebook's API. You can't call the API from an offline location. So testing it locally, like creating a file on Sublime Text and then opening the file in Safari, that's not going to work because you're not actually online. Now, there's a lot of ways to get around this. The best way for us is just to use JS Fiddle because it's already online. So all you're going to do is you're just going to take your whole HTML file that you wrote in Sublime Text, copy it, and paste it into the HTML window in JS Fiddle. It should kind of be blacked out here a little bit, but again, you'll notice that it's the same thing. So you should do all your edits in Sublime Text because it's a lot easier to work with, and then just paste the full file into here. And when you're ready, hit update. You want to look at the full screen result because that's the coolest. And we'll paste it in here. And when you click the Login with Facebook button, this is the button that Facebook automatically generated for you. Thank you, Facebook. You'll notice that the login window pops up. And you should have seen this before when you use other web apps. Okay, so Graph API test, this is going to test the following information, your public profile and email address. Now this is what you asked for in the scope section of the login button. See here? Email and user check-ins. When you add information to that, you add more options here, and the user can either grant or deny you permission. So hopefully our users are going to be granting us permission unless we're doing really nefarious things like stealing their credit card information, or worse, stealing their relationship status on Facebook. But we're going to hit OK for the purpose of this since we know what we wrote. And it pipes in all of your information here. Now you'll notice that my picture is not coming up, neither is my date of birth. That's because my profile is set to private. And that concludes how to log in to Facebook. More exploration is needed to continue to master how this works, but that's the basics, so enjoy. Hope you learned a lot.